Hey, folks, you're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Hendricks. Your time is valuable. I don't like to waste it, so let's go ahead and get right to it. Our guest today is Bo. Bo has over 20 years in logistics. He is currently a logistics operations manager in the great state of Missouri. And this gentleman knows everything about getting stuff from point A to point B. So the stuff on your shelves, he's a big part of why that makes it there. So you can have your crunchy Funyuns or whatever it is that you want. But welcome to the show, Bo. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. It is great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. So let's start off with a little origin story of Bo. And when was your first logistics organizational setup? And we'll just kind of go from there.
Oh, so I actually joined a trucking company in August 1st of 2005. So we are just getting real close to approaching my 20th year
Okay.
with the company. And I got hired on. The owner of the company had just built a new shop, and he knew that I didn't know anything about trucking or mechanics or anything like that, but he needed somebody to kind of help move things into the new shop, clean tools, get everything set up. And I took that job, got me out of bartending and waiting tables, and kind of jumped on that for a while. Really liked it. And about 6 months after I started there, got the opportunity to go to refrigerated mechanics school out in Denver, Colorado,
Hmm.
and learned how to work on the reefer units, which was the biggest part of his business at the time. And from there, worked as a mechanic for a while. Went to kind of the lead mechanic for him in his shop, and then shop manager. Um, Somewhere around 2012, 2013, jumped over into dispatching trucks and managing loads and a little bit of customer relations and stuff like that. And just kind of kept taking on different roles. And shortly thereafter, got named the operations manager for his company. And we've been growing and trucking ever since.
Wow. So you really did start from the bottom and work your way up to the top.
The below the bottom is what I tell everybody. It wasn't even an actual job with the company. It was just somebody taking pity on me and letting me make some money for a while.
Well, now let's jump back a little bit. You had said that you were waiting tables and
Mhm.
bartending. Did you go to school for any sort of specific career, or did you just kind of find yourself floating along, or how did your early years play out?
I did in high school. I actually, in my junior and senior year, had the opportunity to go to a tech school, a vocational school,
Okay.
and I took on the classes in computer programming, which at that time was RPG programming for the nerds out there. Um, and loved it. I mean, I truly loved it. And I think I loved my teacher more than I actually loved the work.
Mm.
And I still to this day, my teacher then, Mr. Meister, the lesson that I took from him was to always think outside the box. And it was such a big part of the computer programming world to not get caught up on a single line of code and to look at the big picture and to step away and see what you could do with things. But graduated with honors through that program. Went to college, went to Crowder College down here in Southwest Missouri,
Yeah.
and they have some computer programming classes there. And whenever me and my two buddies went in and started talking to them about that, they knew our teacher so well that they said, "There's nothing that we can teach you guys. You guys should be the ones teaching the class if you worked under this guy."
Hmm.
Which was really impressive. I mean, it was really neat. And so you kind of bounced around in that for just a little bit, but I really quickly decided that I had no desire whatsoever to live the next 40 years of my life in a cubicle. It just
Yeah.
wasn't something I wanted to do. Been a fan of the outdoors since I was little, hunting and fishing and camping, and I could not see spending that much time in a cubicle in my life. So I just kind of woke up one day and said, okay, I'm not doing that anymore, and moved on to other things. from there, I kicked around a bunch of smaller jobs, just kind of seeing what I liked. I had waited tables in high school, so I went back to that and waited tables, did some bartending, ended up in the kitchen, kind of helping with double shifts and stuff, and really enjoyed that too. But it wasn't going to be a career. So whenever I got the opportunity to come work for Mike and his trucking company, it was a pretty big leap to go from what I was making bartending to what you make as a tool cleaner.
Right.
But it was something that I thought could benefit me down the road, and it was a worthwhile gamble. It turns out. So
It was a foot in the door for you, wasn't it?
yeah, it was a foot in the door on a ground level company. They had just started, and I at that point he was really just looking for some good, honest, hard workers, and he was willing to grow whoever that was from there, regardless of their experience.
I think that's something that you don't see as much as you used to see. I think we're relatively close in age. I might be a little bit older than you, but our grandparents and our parents would talk about how you start from the bottom, you work your way up, a
Hmm.
company will invest in you, then you have a pension, you get a gold watch when you retire, and there you go.
Yep.
And but nowadays it's they expect 20-year-olds to have a PhD and 10 years of experience, and then they're paying $35,000 a year. And
Hmm.
so it's hard to find these opportunities to get in and prove yourself. Now, there's a step that you have to take, not you personally, but a person has to take. If you get your foot in that door, you need to make the most of that opportunity. And that's what you did.
Yeah, I don't think you're given those chances, 7 or 8 or 9 times in your lifetime. So
Uh-uh.
whenever they come around, if you can see through the fog, because being a 21-year-old that could have went and without a college degree, just with what I got in high school, I could have went and been a programmer for several companies at any time. I mean, at any given time, I could have went and done that. But it took me a while. There were some big things that I wanted. I wanted to live here in the town I live in, which is Purdy, Missouri, a little bitty town that I mainly grew up in. And there's no programming jobs here in Purdy at that time. There was no real uh, remote work situations, in
Mm-hmm.
2005.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't know, w- looking back on it now, I look at it and go, man, that was really kind of risky, Bo. You had a lot of tools already in your pocket,
Yeah.
and you went and started cleaning tools for a guy. But I I at that time I knew that's what I wanted. I wanted to be home. I wanted to be here in my town. And I didn't want to be in a cubicle somewhere. And that checked both those boxes at that time. Uh, all I needed was a little bit of money to go to the corner store once a week and buy the necessary things for the weekend, and I was good. So it checked my boxes at that time.
Well, and when you're young, that's when you can take those calculated risks like that. But
Yeah.
you mentioned something about you didn't want to sit in a cubicle all day, and you could have gone and done programming at any time. If you don't have the option to look into the future with a crystal ball, but is there is was there some benefit to having that base knowledge now that logistics is so digital?
Yeah. So now that has really helped me in areas. We had to build a couple custom apps for our business that we
Okay.
hired a really talented company to do. But I was very involved in that. Like there were lots of questions, and you know, if you click this button, what exactly do we want it to do? And I got to go back to that language, the if then when, statements that we used to use in programming to type
Okay.
all that. I could actually, and I'm nowhere near, what these guys were, but I could go when this happens, we need it to jump to here, and it flowed a lot better.
Hmm.
But I right now I'm in house. I'm kind of the tech guy. I kind of take care of as much stuff as I can.
Hmm.
Um, but going back, I'm telling you, the most valuable thing I learned in that was the importance of thinking outside the box, and that translates to logistics so well, um, because our entire life is outside the box. Um, there's no script for our day to day, hardly at all.
You see these phrases, or you hear these phrases a lot, like think outside the box and
Hmm.
synergy, and sometimes I think they might be overused, but
Yeah, I hate
they're
synergy.
I know I really do too. It's I feel like I'm dealing with a used car salesman when somebody uses that
I
word,
do too.
but at the same time, what it comes down to, thinking outside the box, is you're thinking unconventionally.
Yes.
This is what we've always done.
Hmm.
We need to step back, and there may be a better way if we get a bigger picture.
Yes. Yeah, and
And
and I've kind of went to the term of being able to look through the fog,
there you go.
because I you in logistics, like just this weekend we had a friend of ours. It wasn't actually one of our trucks, but a friend of ours turned his truck over. And we've had that kind of stuff happen in the past. And, your initial reaction is, your blood pressure goes up and your
Mhm.
anxiety hits 10 and all this stuff is going on. But then, you step back from it and you just start picking out pieces of the puzzle that you can put together and go, hey, we need to do this. We need to call this person, and just start plugging that in. And, being able to see through the fog, as I tell people, is such a valuable skill, not to just have in logistics, but man, everything we do in life.
Yeah.
Not get distracted by all the static and the fuzz that's out there, and just look at the problem and figure out a way to solve it.
My dad used to always say, "How do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a
One bite at
time."
a time. Yep.
And it's just, okay, I can't fix all the problems. Which ones can I fix? And then I
Yeah.
start with that box, and then the next box, and then the next box. And, 10 steps from there, you've made a lot of progress towards
Hmm.
fixing all kinds of stuff related to the issue that you're dealing with.
Yep. For sure.
So, logistics.
Hmm.
I know that you deal with basically trucking, but it's not just semi trucks, is it?
So that's our main
Your bulk.
business that we have right now is
Okay.
asset based trucks.
Okay.
We own all of our own trailers. So what we really concentrate on doing is find a customer that has an issue, and we start talking those issues out and figure out if we're going to be a good match together. Um, and then one of the big things that we've done in our program is almost everything we do is a drop trailer program for our customers. So we put a certain amount, if we're hauling 20 loads a week for a customer,
Mhm.
we put 40 trailers into it. So
Okay.
they've always got 20 trailers sitting there that they can load at their convenience while we're out pulling 20.
Okay.
So that's our main
Your bread and
bread and butter.
yeah.
We also have a brokerage. And for those that don't know, brokerages are, when I say asset based, that means that we have trucks and trailers that we haul the product ourselves. A brokerage has the loads, but doesn't have any trucks or trailers. So they go out and find people that have trucks and trailers to haul the freight for them. So we also have a brokerage that helps fill some gaps for us. And then here just recently, um, we built a very, very elaborate automatic truck wash that we're
Hmm.
opening up to the public. And that's kind of going to be our next level of concentration.
Is there one particular field that you ship for, whether it's refrigerated grocery type items or just for stuff for Walmart or feed or anybody?
So right now we're primarily dry vans, which is just a box basically on wheels. So stuff that doesn't need to be refrigerated,
Okay.
that is small enough to fit inside a box instead of having to go on a flatbed. And then I think we've got 8 flatbeds now that we're doing a little bit of work for a customer.
Do you primarily just the lower 48, or you go up into Canada, down into Mexico?
No, thank God, as of right now, we're just in the 48.
Okay. My father-in-law used to, when he retired from farming, he delivered irrigation pivots out of Nebraska, and he went up into Canada quite a bit. He spoke very highly of the process, but he seemed to be one that they liked to use for that because he didn't have a record, he didn't have any child support, nothing like that. He had his hazmat cert. It made it easier for him to get into Canada and then back in the United States.
Yes. And I don't want to do it, but I think it has gotten easier. Um, but I think one of the keys is having a consistent guy on it, like they did with him.
Yeah.
Because it's just like anything else. If they're running the same route over and over, they get on a first name basis with whoever's working the border, and they go, "Oh, it's just old Bill again," and
Right.
they don't. It becomes a lot less hassle, I
Mm.
think, whenever you have some dedicated people doing it.
What's your favorite part out of you've got the brokerage side, you've got the logistics side, you've got the day-to-day operate. Is there one thing you really like?
Uh, so profitability wise, I like the concept of a brokerage, because you get out of having to have all the loans for the equipment and the liability of being out on the road yourself.
Hmm.
But I mean, starting as a mechanic here, I mean, I love laying my hands on a truck.
Hmm.
I I really enjoy just trucking in general. The route planning, even the compliance stuff. Making sure you're compliant with different states and the IFTA taxes and heavy use taxes, all that stuff. Is just I really like puzzles, and there's so many puzzles in that where you can go, hey, if we do this, we can shave off a half cent per mile, and whenever it works, it works well. So I'm going to say the asset based side right now is my favorite, but the brokerage is growing on me considerably.
As I listen to you talk, I have a question that keeps popping up into my head. You talked about your education and then you moved into bartending and waiting tables and now you're here, but you know your business. Did this knowledge come from with each advanced step in the company? Did you just dive into that to learn every nook and cranny of whatever your job was? And as you move up higher and higher and higher, you can look back and see, I know what needs to happen in every position that is now underneath me.
S- yes, I think, and I almost call this a one of the downsides that I have, or one of the uh, cons of Bo, I guess you would say, is I do not like ever feeling like I'm the dumbest person in the room,
Okay.
and I've been like that since I was at least in high school, probably much younger than that. But whenever I came into a job specifically, I mean, I would research, and up into the 2010 and on, YouTube got to where you could watch YouTube and learn so much,
Yeah.
and I just eat it. I mean, I just want to be a sponge and learn everything I can. That way, when I go into a room, I can talk intelligently.
Mm.
I don't need to be the smartest person in the room. Actually, I think that is a lot of times just means that you're in the wrong room. But I want to be able to contribute to the conversation. Uh, so yeah, I mean, with each one of these jobs, you know, I I had never dispatched a truck in my life until I dispatched my first one, and I was the only dispatcher at that time. We had 8 trucks, and I became dispatcher overnight. And
How did that go? It's like, get on the radio. Hello.
yeah, it didn't go well at all for a long time. And it was in flatbed, which to me is one of the hardest arenas to play in. There's so much equipment and state by state laws and different things that you have to know to compete in the flatbed market, and to move your trucks efficiently. I was nowhere near prepared for that.
Hmm.
So I asked tons of questions. I had some people that I knew that I could call and talk to and ask questions of. I learned how to permit overweight, over width, loads on the fly, basically, which is a whole nother level of flatbed transportation. But it was just a step by step process. It's the how to eat an elephant deal.
Yeah.
I had super good drivers that I started with, and whenever I had an issue or something, some of those guys had flatbedded before, so they were one of my biggest assets to have, because I could call them and go, "Hey, I found this load, but they're asking, if we've got coil racks. What the heck's a coil rack?" and they would go, well, it's this, no, we don't have it, or yes, we do, and they would walk me through it and help me. And, within 6 months, we were trucking, right alongside anybody else.
That's really nice when you've got other people that yeah, that's not my job to do what you're doing,
Hmm.
but I'm happy to help because we all move forward when we work together.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a phrase at work it's so cheesy, but everybody says it because it's cheesy, but it's teamwork makes the dream work, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, if I hear that again, that's up there with synergy,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But
Yeah, it is.
there is some truth in that.
There
As
is.
corny as it is, that's a valid statement.
Yeah.
So the DOT stuff, I can imagine that could almost be a job in and of itself, is just DOT compliance when you're
Hmm.
shipping out of state.
Yeah.
What is that so that's not just a state thing, that's a federal thing.
Hmm.
Is that just a nightmare on a daily basis with that?
So again, it was kind of like the dispatching. Whenever I took it on, I didn't have a clue what I was doing.
Hmm.
Now I handle all of our DOT compliance stuff. Um, it's after I've been doing it for almost 2 years now. I've got a pretty good handle on it, but it can be a nightmare. I'm here to tell you, state websites like modot.gov,
Hmm.
the state's websites, they are the most rudimentary 1990s websites I've ever seen in my life. And they're hard to navigate. They crash constantly. You can be 3 hours into, reporting stuff on them and they can crash and there's no backup.
Oh,
It doesn't, constantly keep saving to keep you up to date. You just start over. Um, so there's some of that, but it's really about just keeping good records. Once I figured out that records matter and you keep your records and you keep them very, very secure. Nobody but me, touches our IFTA records because we had just kind of a random audit 2 years ago, right after I took over, and I learned right then, like nobody should touch this, but the person that's going to have to sit through the audit because one piece of paper gets out of order or something like that, and they'll just eat your lunch.
hmm.
They Now the people I had were super nice, and part of that is because I told them right at the beginning. I said, "Look, I've been doing IFTA for 2 months. I've never done it before that. I'm not just going to be able to just get you whatever you want. You're going to have to help me." And they were real good about it, and we got through it. Um, but it can be a hassle. There is a ton of government reach and logistics. Um, we have the e-logs now
Yeah.
that absolutely record every second of your day. It is every second is uh is captured, by that. We've got the DEF systems, which is supposed to be helping with a cleaner idle. So they're in everything, anymore, and it's just a matter of navigating that and being honest with people. And it's kind of like when you get pulled over and you're afraid you're going to get a ticket. If you're a jerk, you're for sure gonna get that ticket.
Right.
So the best thing you can do is be nice, be honest,
Hmm.
and let the cards fall where they're going to fall.
Yeah. Well, the cop doesn't want to do paperwork any more than you do. So if
Yeah.
you're just cordial, unless you were just obscenely over
Yeah.
the speed limit or something,
Yeah.
your chances of, if you just apologize and be nice, your chances of just getting a warning go way up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But except for, well, there's one, I won't talk about him. He's yeah, I think he's out to get me. But anyway, um, so what's a typical day like in your world? Let's say, I don't know what time you get in the office. Let's just say 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. You come walking in, you got your cup of coffee.
Hmm.
What is a day like for a logistics operations manager in your line of work?
So for our company, it's a little different than a lot of them. I wear a few more hats than most would, but I start my day here at 7. Um, the main reason for that is I've always said, we can't let the East Coast get ahead of us, and
Ah,
so when they start at 8, it's 7 o'clock here, and we need to be working. So I start at 7 with at least a 32-ounce coffee in hand, ready to go. I have been drinking some Red Bull though, and I have become a really big fan of Red Bull, as much
Really?
as I hate to say it.
Mm.
Uh, but so I get here. There's one other dispatcher here at 7, and I kind of get with her, make sure everything's good, make sure we don't have any driver issues that I need to get involved in. I run our fuel reports, and again, that's basically for IFTA. But I run our fuel reports from the day prior, get them all entered in to my spreadsheet that I created to speed up IFTA taxes. After that, I'll go through and check my emails, make sure the world hasn't caught on fire overnight or anything. And then when everybody else starts showing up at kind of 8, I do a shop check in. I'm over the shop, make sure that we're all on the same page with what trucks need done first in order for them to get out. Ask them, if there's any holdups in getting on those events happening, like parts. You know, Truck didn't make it in until late. Whatever. And then I go usually talk to the dispatch manager and get a real good breakdown of the day and what's coming up, who's delivering, who's picking up, where we going. Um, and then once we kind of have all that kind of gathered all together, we can kind of plan on what trucks are going to be ready for which loads and start building those. The rest of the day, I tell everybody, the biggest part of my job is just to kill rats all day. Somebody will holler and say, "Hey, can you look at this? Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, we've got this problem. Can you jump in?" And I just kind of bounce around everywhere, in the dispatch, the bookkeeping, the shop, our truck wash that's now open, and then when I don't have something like that going on, that's when I work on the compliance stuff. Um, we take on some more fabricated fabrication projects for different customers, and I, sometimes the boss asks me to get involved in those and help him kind of get paperwork in line and billing and stuff. So I after that I just kind of fill gaps with whatever I need to do on my end.
When you say fabrication, are you talking about welding type stuff?
Yeah, we've actually got to where we're putting Conestoga kits on some trailers, and that's like the best way I know how to describe it is like the old cowboy covered wagons.
Huh.
And so basically, it's a flatbed with a bowed tarp system on it that will roll forward and back, and it makes it to where the driver doesn't actually have to tarp the loads. It makes it into like a dry van trailer that can load long or wide stuff on it.
Huh. I haven't
So
seen I haven't seen those even out in the wild. Is that a
yeah,
relatively new
yeah,
thing?
and you probably just haven't noticed it,
Okay.
but I mean, it's fairly common. But there's not a lot of people that install them around here. So we kind of became a dealer for a company and have a couple customers that require those. So we've got into that a little bit and doing those installs.
The turning of the wrenches, that's you talked about dealing with your mechanics in the shop. That is, I remember my father-in-law would tell me that, he was an owner operator. And he said, it's really great that you're your own boss until your transmission craps out and it's $10,000.
Hmm.
Or you
Yeah.
got to get new tires and they're, thousands of dollars for tires.
Yes. Yeah.
So everything on those semi trucks is really expensive. It's nothing like a passenger vehicle at all.
No. 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 It's so much more expensive. I mean, a good steer tire right now is $600 to $800, and
Good
you have
grief.
two of them. So that's a $2,000 repair just to change just the steer tires out. We've got another 16 behind that. Of varying prices between the truck and trailer. So just in tires alone, it's an enormous expense to start repairing tractors and trailers.
You see so many trucks on the road, but is it a correct statement that yes, they do occasionally need repairs, but
Mhm.
if they're well maintained, they're going to go for a while?
Yeah, they're going to go longer, than the average vehicle. Right now, if we buy new trucks, we very seldom have to do hardly anything to them until they're 300,000 miles plus, which
Wow.
that's the end of life for a lot of vehicles.
Hmm.
And that's whenever we're doing, uh, changing the drive tires out, starting to maybe see some battery issues, things like that. But we've went 800,000 with some of these new trucks before we've really had to replace many components of the truck. The biggest thing now is the DEF system. DEF system still, they just haven't got it figured out how to make that actually practical for operational use. And so we've been into DEF systems at 40, 50,000 miles doing something. Now it's usually not major at that point, but usually by 4 or 500,000 you're doing complete replacements of that entire system for the tune of eight, nine, $10,000.
Good grief.
Yeah.
Are you hear about these trucks like the Tesla semi truck and stuff, and I know
Hmm.
that a fully electric that might work if you're just delivering things in town.
Yeah.
I don't see, I mean, batteries have a long way to go before they could even come close to replacing an over the road combustion engine.
Yeah.
But are you seeing things on the fringe that's working its way in, like a hybrid system? Or I think, what do you call the little power units that allow you to run the air conditioning and the heating with the engine off? A
Yep,
GPU?
that's the APU. That's the
APU, that's it.
auxiliary power unit.
Okay.
Which is, I mean, it works good. That's something that they've pretty well figured out. But that was somebody, those are primarily made by companies like Thermo King and Carrier, which made the big cooling units on the trailers for the refrigerated trailers for
Okay.
decades. So to them they went, oh, you want a little one that'll only do, we'll take you down to like 65 degrees inside the cab. Yeah, that's no problem. We're used to doing negative 20. you know that's not a problem. So they had a pretty good jump on that market
Mhm.
whenever that started becoming a deal. That came into effect whenever specifically like California, some of Illinois started this no idle act,
Yeah.
which prevents you from idling your truck in certain areas, which is fine. I get that. It's great. But we were just lucky that, some companies like Thermo King and Carrier had already been, in that area as long as they had. And they made it pretty seamless. They jumped right in and made something and it's worked good.
Are those APUs still operated by diesel, just on a
Yes.
smaller scale?
Yes.
Okay.
So a diesel truck idling, and these are rough numbers. This totally depends on your engine and all kinds of stuff. But I figure about a gallon an hour if you're idling your truck. I figure about a cup an hour if you're idling an APU.
Wow.
So there's a big difference there.
Hmm.
And really, over time, whether you know people are for helping the environment or not, if it's taken care of and you do your job right, it probably is saving you money at the end of it, not idling the truck as much as you were.
Right. Do you see batteries like lithium has come a long way over the last few years? They're
It
getting more
has.
powerful and smaller. Do you see them eventually taking over? I can see the APU being a primary
Hmm.
target for battery technology.
So, and the APU actually runs off the truck batteries too.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and the APU, I mean, it keeps you warm and cool. It also runs off the same antifreeze that your truck does most of the time. So that circulates and keeps your coolant warm in the winter.
Oh, there you
So
go.
you don't do cold starts.
Okay.
And then it always manages your battery. So when your battery drops down to a certain voltage, it kicks on and charges your batteries. So the APU is really an ingenious product. I mean, it does a lot more than just runs an air conditioner, for your truck.
Yeah.
It's actually helping maintain, other things that could get you in trouble out on the road.
Do they provide heat, or do they just simply provide the electricity to run like a Webasto diesel heater or something that you already have in the truck?
Yeah, so what they have is kind of like that. It's just like a little turbo heater
Okay.
underneath the bunk, and it provides electricity basically to fire. It's diesel, too, that runs to it, and it
Hmm.
fires that, and then you have heat.
Okay. What's the what's the next? Is there something that you see on the forefront or in the near future that technology wise you think is going to move in and improve the trucking industry or logistics? Is there something you see out there that you've kind of got your eye on?
Oh, hands down, AI.
Oh, really?
Yeah, hands down. I mean,
In,
it's already here.
in what
We're
in
already
what
seeing it.
in what capacity?
So the biggest thing that I see AI doing is and it's already kind of there. I don't want to act like I'm calling that it's going to be here soon because they're already kind of doing it.
Right.
But there's going to be the ability, and I would say for sure in the next 5 years with the rate that AI is improving, where we have what's called TMS, and that's your trucking management software. And it's like QuickBooks for a bookkeeper, right? So,
Okay.
we have all of our equipment in there. We put all of our loads in there. And, we drag this load over to this truck and, it gives you an ETA and, you empty that truck and you can dispatch your drivers off that. You can put in all the load information and hit it's going to this truck, dispatch, and it'll send them a text and go, here's what your next load is. So that's our TMS that we're using right now. But what I see happening is that's all very, very structured, um, mathematical calculations that can be made, right?
There's no
Uh,
on the fly adaptation with that, is there?
well, there is the way we do it now,
Okay.
but I think part of that is because just at the end of the day, I mean, AI can run so many more calculations and find such a better answer in such short amount of time
Yeah.
that eventually, we're going to put all of our trucks in there. We're probably still going to have to enter our loads, at least for a while. But after that, the AI is just going to pick trucks and driver or loads and trucks and match those up all the way to the point that it's going to get to it's have you played with AI much?
Oh, a little bit. I mean, I use it in some of my software editing
Yeah.
for the podcast, and it's when it works, it's great. When it doesn't, it is infuriating.
Yes, I mean it can get off on tangents and
Yeah.
stuff that I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, you're way off base.
Yeah.
But I think after a certain amount of time dealing with John Doe driver, right? It's going to go. If John's got the choice, he would much rather go to uh, Florida than he would South Dakota. So we're going to move this Florida load over to John and keep him happy. And this other guy, he doesn't really care where he goes, so we'll give him the South Dakota load. Like I see that for sure happening in the next 5 years, to where a room of 10 dispatchers will go down to one or maybe two that are just really good at looking at the data and going, oops, AI made a mistake there. They AI thinks John loves Florida and he hates that place. That's where his ex-wife lives. He doesn't ever want to go back there. And they'll change that, but it's so close already with some of the stuff that I've been seeing. I just cannot help but think that'll be very quickly in the future. And then from there, I think that transitions over to your back office, your AR, AP. I think that flows right into that, to where AI is just gonna pretty well send out your invoices for you and take payments for you. And I that's my opinion anyway. I'm an AI nerd. I love it with my background,
Hmm.
and I just see a lot of possibilities with it.
Well, it's not just even when I hear you talking about, John doesn't want to go to Florida, he'd rather go to Indiana or vice versa. It's not
Uh-huh.
just customization, but it's personalization.
Yes. Yes.
And that's a whole different level of service, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because it after, and I'm careful to say that it won't make a mistake, but it will make fewer mistakes than a human will make, especially whenever you get on. Ours is still very, very personal here.
Yeah.
We've got 37 trucks. We know everybody's name.
Hmm.
We know their families. They bring their dogs in to see us. It's personal. But you look at the bigger fleets that have, 500-600 trucks. You're no longer to a point to where you can know everybody. It's
No.
just not. It's not physically or mentally capable for a human to do that. You just
Yeah.
can't.
Hmm.
And so AI, can know 5,000 trucks. and after a certain amount of time know them intimately and know that, where John likes to go, or,
Hmm.
hey, John's anniversary is coming up. We might want to send out a message to him to remind him, hey, your anniversary is coming up. Do you want the a long weekend?
You just made every truck driver happy, man.
I I'm telling you that the possibilities are just endless with it
Yeah.
whenever it gets, to full steam. Now, again, I don't think we're there yet, but I do think that's the way we're headed.
As I hear you talking, you just mentioned about you're a big enough company, but you're still small enough to where you know your drivers by their first name and you have that unique luxury of
Hmm.
having that personal relationship. The trick for some of these companies is to implement AI and still maintain that customer service relational aspect, because I can see it very easily turning into, well, that's driver 775. That's not John.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and I I hope that, the smaller companies can keep that personalization of their
Hmm.
company and with their employees, because that was something we were really big on whenever we were getting started. Is Mike would not allow us to have employee numbers. He would not allow it. He didn't. I mean, we had an outside company that was doing our payroll, and even in their own system, he said none of our employees will have an employee number.
Hmm.
And that was period, end of story. And it's been that way ever since. And, you know, nowhere on any piece of paper anywhere does anybody have a number of any kind other than their name. I mean, it's, we learn their names and we become personal with them and get to know them very, very well. And it's really benefited us. We don't have near the driver turnover that I hear from a lot of other companies. I personally feel like our driver satisfaction stays very, very high, but every single driver gets my personal cell phone number. They can call at any time, and I tell all of our drivers during orientation that they are going to get mad out on the road. Like, there are going to be those days where nothing's went right, somebody has treated them poorly, somewhere where they were delivering, dispatch isn't getting them load fast enough. Just call me and just say, hey, listen, I need to cuss at somebody for the next 5 minutes, and get it off your chest. And you would be surprised how many of them have taken me up on that and will just call and go, listen, I'm just telling you ahead of time, I ain't mad at you, but I need to yell and scream and cuss for just a minute, and then we'll go back to work. And they get it off their chest, and I go, all right, you feel better? Yep. All right, let's go back to work. And they're not, I doubt that they have that, in the big companies where they have
Yeah.
500 or 600 trucks.
Yeah.
It's just not something somebody can field all day.
Well, there is a scaling aspect to that, but my wife and I have this thing where if I walk in and shut the door like, "Hey, I need to vent." And she'll go,
Hmm.
"Okay." And she'll just sit there and let me vent. And then
Yep.
I'll go, "All right. Hey, thanks a lot. I just had to get that off my chest." I'm not at her, just about, something's going on with the kids or school or the bank or whatever it would
Yep.
be.
Whatever it is.
That pressure relief valve is really important to have both at work and at home.
Hmm.
So, if somebody wanted to, you've got a lot of experience, you've got a lot of career to look back on. You have a career where you've done a number of positions as you've worked your way up. So if somebody came to you and said, "I want to do what you're doing, what advice can you give me to make my process more streamlined, easier, more efficient?"
Well, so I think there's two ways to look at that. Um, you know, Again, I was super, super fortunate to find somebody that was, ground floor starting something.
Yeah.
Very few people are going to get that opportunity. So, as the industry and the market kind of sets right now, you still kind of need college to get a very good job, unless you want to start, as a dispatcher or as a grunt mechanic, to get your foot in the door. But I still, I talk to lots of guys that, still to this day, started as, you know the very bottom of the barrel dispatcher. They said, here, dispatch, these trucks that we all hate to dispatch because the driver's a jerk. This is your job. If they did good at it, Then before too long, they said, here, we're going to move this over to you because you did such a good job on that. This is kind of a problem customer. Now we need you to handle this and see how you do. And, I've seen people, crawl the ranks like that. And I talk to them occasionally. But right now, I think there's still some benefit to college if you wanted to end up in the role that I'm in. Um,
What degree would you recommend? Just a general business degree?
Uh, I think a general business degree is probably fine. There's some really good logistics degrees out there now. I don't look into them a lot, so I don't know exactly what they are
Hmm.
or what they consist of. But I do know of some people that have went through the school and got those. They're a 4-year bachelor's degree and have stepped into some pretty okay jobs. But at the end of the day, there is absolutely nothing that will take the place of just in the field experience.
Yeah.
I kind of feel bad for those guys that got their 4-year degree and go to work for a company that's got 150 trucks and they get a very very rude awakening. I would say in the first day.
Yeah. You talked a second ago about when you get that opportunity to dispatch for this guy, you're going to be over this guy. He's rude.
Hmm.
He's a problem employee, or you're going to deal with this customer who nobody wants to deal with. When you're successful in that, it's a double-edged sword because like, hey, good job. Here's another one. It's the worst compliment you can ever get because it's like we give you all the redheaded stepchild, so to speak. No offense to the redheaded people out
Yep.
there.
Yeah, we love the redheads.
Right. I've got some friends that are redheads, great people. Um, but it's a horrible skill set to have, and you'll eventually get out of it.
Yeah.
But you have to look at it as this is my opportunity to prove myself.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
And the workforce is very different now. And
in what
I
way?
well, so I think anymore once I almost think there's a more direct compensation for performance now than there used to be. So, it doesn't take very long of them giving you, hey, I proved myself here. Now we're going to give you some more junk before you're pretty okay with going, hey, I can do that. But I really want to talk about, where I'm at pay wise first.
Sure.
And I think employers are far more receptive to that than they used to be after going through the COVID debacle all the way up through really through 24, where it was just really hard to find employees that really just didn't have all 52 cards in the deck and just tell you what they wanted and how they wanted it.
Yeah.
I think it was a little bit eye opening for employers to go, it needs to be a little more give and take. And I have seen people that are pretty bold about going, hey, I've done what you asked me to do. You're giving me more. Now we need to up the pay. They're very upfront about that, and I think that's a great time to do it because I mean, not only are you performing the task, but you're making sure right off the bat early on that people aren't going to walk on you and
Yeah.
take advantage of your skill set.
I was talking with a friend of mine here recently, and I'm 50 years old, so I'm Gen X, and I look at some of the generations that are younger than me, and the older generations always crap on the younger ones, and it all rolls
Yeah,
downhill.
yeah.
That's how it always is. So I don't lose much sleep over that. But there's a couple of things that I see that the younger generations got wrong, but one thing that they got right. And sometimes you'll have people come in and they have a degree and it's their first day and they expect to be in charge.
Hmm.
You haven't proven yourself. I don't care where you work and you don't know what you're doing.
Hmm.
And so you need to have the humility to come in and
Yep.
show that you're worth investing in.
Hmm.
But one thing I think they got right is they don't just take crap and just have it shoveled on them and like, well, I'm just blessed to have a job. Like, no, I'm busting my butt and I needed to be rewarded for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
For
is
sure.
this is a relationship. I work for you and you pay me.
Hmm.
And so, I hear some employers say, well, nobody wants to stick around at a job. And some of that may be laziness, but some of that may be you're not taking care of your employees like you should.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the real truth that came out of the last 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
for all industries, in
Hmm.
general, was that there's a give and take relationship there. Like it's not a one way street.
Right.
I can go somewhere else and make just as much money, if not more, because there's somebody out there struggling to fill my position right now.
Right.
And without it sounding bad, I can take advantage of them because of that situation and get more money. And that was something 15, 20 years ago just really wasn't the case that I can remember.
Sure. And you said you're taking advantage of them. They're taking advantage of you in a
Yes.
respect. It's a
Yeah.
business relationship.
Yeah.
So we're maximizing our options, or
Hmm.
can we work synergy in there some
Yeah.
way?
Yeah.
So the the positives of your career. If someone came to you and they said, "What do you like most about your job?" You listed a couple of things. But what do you dislike most about your job? Is there one thing that you wish if I never have to see X again, what is it?
If I my phone, if I was ever not in this role, I've told everybody I would go and I would apply at Lowe's and I would be employee of the month every month, but I would burn my phone on day one because it's just nonstop. I
Yeah.
mean, the phone rings, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Mhm.
Uh, it rings on Christmas Day. It rings on your daughter's birthday. It is constantly ringing. So that, I mean, as far as everything, the phone calls and the inability to detach from work is probably my least favorite thing.
Do you ever have the opportunity to have someone go, "I need you to man the phone for this weekend"?
So, I mean, there's about three of us that field phone calls, and it really depends on the level of whatever's going on.
Okay.
Um, you used to, I mean, if there was a flat tire, I got a phone call. If there was a problem at a customer, I got a phone call. Uh, if there was a problem at a DOT scale, I got a phone call. If the driver was having a bad day, I got a phone call.
Right.
And over the past 5 years, we've got to where like the flat tire, simple mechanic stuff, I don't have to get involved in anymore, which is great. We've got some good dispatchers now. Not that we didn't then, but we've had longer uh, time to develop those relationships now, and so drivers tend to be able to call other people if they're just kind of having simple issues, like, hey, my pickup number or delivery number's wrong, can you look it up, so I don't have to field that as much. um, but I still, you know if it gets much past that, then somebody's usually texting or calling me and going, hey, at the very least, just so you know, here's what's going on. Here's what we're trying to do to fix it. So it has got better. But again, I'm very much I was fly fishing this weekend and, had my phone on me. So I'm very much I would really like the opportunity to completely disconnect and just
Mhm.
go, hey, I've got my wife and kid with me. I don't need to know anything else in the world right now,
Right.
you know. So, uh, but again, I that's my least favorite thing, about the job. But my favorite thing is the people.
Yeah.
My very favorite thing is the people. And if they can't call me, I lose some of that.
Sure.
If they don't feel like I can call Bo at any time, then some of that people relationship, I have to sacrifice along with that, and I wouldn't do that.
Well, eventually, maybe you can get to where we call Bo. We'll have the bat phone, the Bo phone.
Yeah, yeah,
And I just came up with that. That was pretty good.
I like that one.
The Bo phone. It'll be a
Yeah.
red cell phone, and that's
Uh huh.
only if it really hits the fan. That's when we call
Yep.
Bo. What kind of person do you think would excel in your occupation, and specifically their personality style? Do you need to be, or does it lend itself easier to be an extrovert versus an introvert? And what types of soft skills really would allow someone to be successful quickly in your line of work?
So I think for sure extrovert.
Okay. because of the people's
Yes.
aspect. Okay.
Yes, there's so much people relations in what I do on a day to day. I My personal opinion would be a introvert would really really struggle to enjoy the job. Now they might be able to do it. They might be able to push through it, but inside I don't think that they could remain really happy with the job because there's just too much people interaction.
Yeah.
Um, One of the best skills that I think I picked up was I had to take speech classes in college where you actually had to get up and give speeches. All the different speeches that that they try to teach you, and that's become very very handy in what I do, to where I can sit down and lead a meeting and keep things on track, get a point across. So that being able to talk to people, I think, in a way that resonates with them is a really really big chunk of whenever you get into more top tier management. um, because I mean the only person I answer to is the owner, so
Yeah.
everybody under that I have to be able to communicate to. Other than that, I mean you have to have a real strong caffeine addiction, um, because I mean, there's been several times where we've got a phone call at 2 a.m. and it's, "Hey, I'm 4 hours from you, and I just got an accident. I'm on
Mm.
my way." And you have to you have to jump out of bed and throw some shorts on and pour a quick cup of coffee and go.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, I think moving forward, now I don't think this was really very true whenever I started in the industry 20 years ago, but a really really solid electronics background is going to become more and more important.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I say that, but whenever I start talking about where I'm at electronically, my 15-year-old daughter goes, "Dad, you're a dinosaur. Like, let me show you the easy way to do that."
Don't
And
you
it's
hate that?
commonplace to them. It's not like they went to school for it.
I know it.
They just know.
Yeah.
So they may look at what I do on a day to day and go, "Yeah, that's so simple that I'm going to get sick of doing it." But I think they've got to be able to change with the times, because they're going to be in the same boat me and you are in. I'm sure when you were in high school, you knew whatever tech stuff there was. You were around whenever I was around, and CDs came out, right? CDs were, whoo boy, you know.
Yeah, oh, yeah, that was cutting edge, but I also took
Yeah,
a typing class in high school
I
on a
did too.
typewriter. So,
Not on a typewriter.
yeah, Commodore 64 was cutting edge for me at the time. So,
Yeah, so we saw those things, and
yeah,
our kids, have now, AI is just going to be, just their left hand.
yeah,
They're just going to go. AI can handle these projects for me today. I don't even have to look at this. Um, they can get around a computer so much better. Had me and you looked at the computers that we have today 20 years ago, and somebody just set us down behind it, it would have been like living in Star Trek. Like,
oh,
we would have been like, "Holy cow,
yeah.
where's that annoying phone sound whenever I want to get onto the internet?" uh, so I would say they need to be paying attention to technology and electronics and getting a feel on that. um, but I really, I'm going to go right back to one of the first things we talked about, and I think it goes into a lot of industries. But being able to think outside the box, look through the fog, not or be able to see the forest for the trees
Hmm.
instead of the other way around. Being able to be a problem solver and not get super super high strung because of a problem, which my personal opinion is that's going to be one of the biggest problems that plagues this next generation coming up. Is I think they're going to be very very used to instant gratification with social media and stuff that we have now,
Yeah.
and to have to set back and pause and strategically think through problems instead of just hitting a button, I think is going to be one of the hurdles that some of them, not all of them, but some of them are going to have to be able to overcome to do some of these jobs.
It can be when you're so used to just grabbing your phone, which good grief, our phones nowadays. I mean, I heard a statistic once where our modern day iPhones or Android phones have like 10 times the computing power of what they use to land on the moon.
Yeah.
if you believe in that, which of course I do, but that's a whole other. So it's just amazing, the technology and everything in our hand. You can order food, you can
Mhm.
you can pay your bills. I mean, you can do everything on your phone.
Yeah.
But I can also see that if you're so used to just pushing buttons and that all of a sudden doesn't work and you have to go, heaven forbid, analog,
Mhm.
it can be overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I without getting off on a huge
Yeah.
tangent, I kind of like the conspiracy theory type stuff, and I think one of the greatest threats to our entire world right now is the disappearance of technology
Yeah.
because so many people would be crippled
Hmm.
uh, immediately. I could see my daughter just breaking down into tears after about 2 hours and just not know physically what to do next
Sure.
without that phone.
Yeah.
So but I've got high hopes. I see a lot of kids coming into the industry that are hard workers that want to work, but they want compensated fairly, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Um, and and really, I think some of that has improved or sharpened their mind's edge on how to work some problems,
Hmm.
which I think is going to be a benefit.
I think they have an advantage if they can look at two arenas. They've got the digital aspect covered. They're used to
Hmm.
that. They know how to interact with it. They would be a force to be reckoned with if they could also, I got a problem to solve and I don't have my phone or digital to figure it out. I have to use, a pencil, or I have to make a phone call, or I have to do something kind of old school.
Yep.
If you can learn how to coexist in both worlds like that, especially coming up, it'll allow you to relate to multiple coworkers and supervisors of various ages.
Hmm.
And I think you'd just be way more successful than just having all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, bridging that gap for these
Yeah.
kids coming up to
Yep.
be able to talk to the 60-year-old owner along with the 18-year-old coworker
Yeah.
is going to make them dangerous. I
Yeah.
mean, they will be dangerous employees.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's I've talked to my daughter a lot about this. We like to go camping, and the whole overlanding movement type thing. I just really love and going out
Yeah.
and doing that stuff. And I've really pushed my daughter for whenever she graduates to just take a year off. And I said I will buy you the truck, the setup, and everything, and just go travel.
Yeah.
Force yourself into those situations to where you're seeing new things and hey, I'm out of money, well, I'm going to have to get a little job here for a little bit waiting tables at this place I've never been before to get some gas money.
Yep.
And I think it could be huge, and
Hmm.
everybody laughs at me, but I'm like, that's what I wish I would have done. I wish
Yeah.
I would have just went and did something totally for myself before real life started, and have nothing else, holding me back, zero bills, zero responsibility, and just be myself for a year. Because I think that's the only time that a lot of those kids are ever really going to find their self,
Yes.
is whenever there's not all this other stuff pounding down on them.
I'm trying to convey that message to my oldest son now. He's going to be moving out and going on his own here, not for too much longer. And I'm trying to impress upon him that when you leave, it's you.
Hmm.
There's no more mommy and daddy.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll always be here, of
Oh
course. You
yeah,
can
for
always
sure.
come home, but you decide how to manage your time. You
Hmm.
decide what to eat, what to spend your money on.
Yep.
And you're going to have to kind of grow up, but all the responsibility now is on you, but you also have all of the freedom to go do what you want. So go do it.
Hmm.
The overlanding stuff, I love that stuff as well.
Oh, it's so cool.
I always said if I ever won the lottery or Powerball or whatever, I would go get an old Land Cruiser and trick that sucker out. I had a
I just
FJ60
went and
that,
looked at one the other day.
which one? What
uh,
model?
it's one over in Joplin that I found, and it's a '92, and it is it's just a little farther gone than what I wanted to mess with.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I'm not big on body work. Like, I like engines and interior and stuff, but you got to get into like rust, and
Yeah.
I'm just like, man, I don't know if I want to do that. But Land Cruiser is my dream car, like
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. I've got a 2001 Toyota Sequoia, and that's like the poor man's Land Cruiser.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got 278,000 miles on that 4.7 liter V8. And my family, if they listen to this, which sometimes they listen to my podcast, they hate to hear me talk about. I love that truck so much. I mean, it's just been such a good vehicle,
Oh, they're
and
bulletproof.
but I take care of it. I maintain it. Um, I just love taking that thing out on the road, and even with almost 300,000 miles, it fires right up and it runs
Hmm.
just as smooth as could be.
Yep, I've got an '01 4Runner.
Oh yeah,
That's decked out. You know,
yep,
I've done it pretty well right, and it's my favorite car to drive.
yes,
I've got a 2022 Tundra. My wife's got a 2015 4Runner, and my daughter's got an '06 Tacoma.
nice.
And I'm a Toyota guy,
Oh yeah, me too.
but if I just want to go just cut loose for a little bit, I jump in my 4Runner and find a back road.
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah, Forerunners, man, you can't go wrong with a Forerunner. Well, the new stuff, I don't know. I
I
think
don't like the new stuff.
I mean it's got a lot of tech and it's got a lot of cool
Hmm.
things, but Toyota seems like they're losing their soul a little bit.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah,
They, you know, the fifth gen Forerunner was the last one where I was like, don't go any farther.
right.
Like, stop
Yeah.
before we're Ford and Chevy and all those guys.
Yep.
And I looking at the new Tacoma and the new Forerunner, I'm a little afraid that they've lost their soul.
Well, and what I mean, it's not just Toyota, but what new vehicles cost anymore. I'm
Oh
not going to
yeah,
pay $67,000 for a Tacoma,
no, I'm not doing
but
it.
even if I could, well,
Yeah.
maybe if I could, but
Well, again, I mean the lottery conversation.
yeah,
I'd probably
yeah.
own them all.
I don't know. It's also principle at that point. I'm going to buy an older vehicle and then fix it
Oh
up how
yeah,
I want it for half the price. So,
yep. Like an old Defender. I've
oh
always wanted an
yeah,
old Defender.
yeah. We could talk about this forever, man.
Oh
But
yes.
so let's get let's get back onto the logistics side of things
Yeah,
as
go ahead.
we land the plane.
Okay.
What's your best advice for if one of your employees comes to you and they screwed up, they made a mistake, or how do you deal with failure, and how would you advise someone working with or for you to deal with failure?
So I hadn't been working here very long, and I was mechanicking, and part of my job was to grab the trailers with our yard jockey truck and pull them into the shop. And whenever they got in there, I would do some of the work. I wasn't really totally in on the mechanic side of it at that time.
Hmm.
Um, but it was the first time it ever happened to me where I screwed the pooch. And so, especially reefer doors, they're kind of thick because they're insulated, and trailer doors swing back to the sides of the trailer and you hook them, and they hold themselves open there. And I had went out and grabbed a trailer. It was hot outside and we'd hauled some nastier stuff in it, so I'd open up the doors to let it air out. And I was bringing that trailer in, and one of those door hooks came undone. And as I was pulling it into the shop, it came out and caught the big uh, door frame of the building, and I mean tore stuff up.
Ugh.
And again, I hadn't been there very long, and I was terrified. I was like, well, I guess it's back to the bar for me. I'm going to be bartending by tonight. And I went in and I said, hey, listen, I screwed up bad. Here's what I did. And we walked out there, and he looked at it for a minute and he said, well, what'd you learn? And I said, well, I for sure learned not to be pinning these doors back whenever I bring them in the shop. And he said, all right, let me call my metal guy and we'll get him over here to fix it. And that was it. Like, that
Wow.
was the end of the conversation. And, I've seen our owner do that with several other people over the years where they've done something that was a pretty good mistake. It wasn't a $5 mistake. It was a, $1,500 mistake. And I've never seen him jump on anybody. Um, but I've heard him almost every single time ask, what did you learn? Now, if you didn't learn anything, you were probably in trouble.
Yeah.
But if you could go, well, this is what I did wrong. Here's what I'm going to do to correct it from now on. That was the end of the conversation. Always has been in this company. If you knew what you did wrong, knew how to prevent it from there on out, that was just it. And I've really picked up on that. We have guys come in that'll back up into a car or catch a pole in a parking lot, and that's the first question out of my mouth is, what'd you learn and how are we going to prevent it next time? And that's kind of how we handle those situations until it happens multiple times, and then it's
Yeah.
another conversation.
So any of your employees listening, if they do something, they need to come find you and say, "Look, I made a mistake, and I want to tell you what I learned from it,"
Yeah.
before you even get the chance to ask.
Yeah, that makes it real easy. Like, let's just have the conversation and move forward.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a manager when you were new that had been down this road before and had
Hmm.
the experience and probably the wisdom and the age to realize this is the best way to handle this the first time it happens.
Yeah. Yep.
And you also owned up to it and learned from it. And that's
Hmm.
key right there, is owning up to it and learning from it. Everybody makes mistakes.
Yep.
But if you can just say, man, I royally screwed up. Sorry, it won't happen again. And this
Hmm.
is what I'm going to do to change it. And then you proceed to follow your own advice.
Yep. Yep.
That's,
I've never pulled a trailer in the shop in 20 years with the doors pinned back. I mean, I could do that 400 times and it would never happen again.
hmm,
But I will not pull a trailer into our shop with the doors pinned back. Just won't do it because I remember that every single time.
yeah. Well, yeah, lesson learned.
Yeah.
So I'm not asking you what you make, but if someone was curious about what logistics typically pays,
Mhm.
or like if you want to be a dispatcher, do you have any rough numbers in your head as far as this is what you might expect to pay starting and this is the ceiling? Or can you give me any numbers to work with at all?
Yeah, I mean, in dispatching, I think it's a pretty wide range. You could pretty easily in this market expect to make a minimum of $20 an hour.
Okay.
Starting just about anywhere. I would say if it's less than that, I would go find somewhere else to work.
Okay.
And I know dispatchers that make 60, $70,000 a year. And above that, but I would say your 60, 70,000 for a good season dispatcher is getting near the top.
Okay.
Um, Brokers are slightly different because a lot of brokerages work off commission. So the cheaper you can sell a load to somebody and the profit margin's bigger, you get 10% of the profit or whatever. So that gives people a little bit of an opportunity to control their own paycheck,
Mm,
which is nice. What we've seen in the past several years, though, is the take the lowest bid trucking method that a lot of people are using, and that has backfired on them, horribly,
yeah.
to the point that a lot of those people that were making really good money brokering loads have lost their jobs because the lowest bid trucking company out there that said they'd take the load never showed up to pick up, never showed up to delivery. uh didn't strap down the load and lost load in transit.
You get what you pay for.
Yeah, you get what you pay for. So,
Mm,
uh, you have to be careful with some of that. From there, I would think, um, especially right now, if you went and got your bachelor's in logistics and probably, five in between, probably 5 years experience, get in there. Um, you ought to be making 80 to 120, fairly easily.
okay.
As a COO of a trucking company or an operations manager. But again, it depends a lot on how the company's set up. I I wear several different hats. I'm not just the guy that tells the compliance guy what he needs to do or tells the dispatcher what they need to do. So our company is a little different in that, but I know there's a lot of companies out there our size that are kind of doing the same thing. So, but there's some good opportunities out there. I actually had somebody call me. It's probably been a couple months ago, and wanted to talk to me about a job. And yeah, I mean, it was starting at $180,000 a year, and
Wow.
I I was pretty taken back by that. I I didn't know that was even out there. But again, the right person that has been struggling for the last 3 years to fill a spot with somebody that is willing to work hard and um, get on the same dream path as they are on, is worth something to somebody.
Yeah. Well, and that's good to know your worth and to go in there and then work hard to earn it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. What would you say, have you ever gotten a compliment, or what's the most like rewarding thing? I know we talked about what you like most about your job, but
Hmm.
has there ever been something that was just like a one-off incident where you got a really good compliment, or you were just like, man, I feel like I walk out of there, kind of like your Conor McGregor swagger, where you're like, I'm hot stuff. I just nailed my job. I'm out.
So yes, so two short stories, and I know we're trying to wrap up here, but
No,
I've
you're
got
good.
two instances on that. Um, so in 20 years of working for this company, I've only had one complaint that I know of,
Nice.
and it was a ill-forged complaint. It was a customer that we were trying to do business with, and I think he thought I was mansplaining to him whenever I was trying to let him know that the way he had the load set up could not be done on e-logs. And I was trying to explain that to him and saying, you can't deliver this same day because there's not enough hours on the clock. And anyway, it ended up in this big deal. He called the owner, and the owner, brought me in the office and said, "Hey, here's the problem. This is a new customer. You need to fix it." And I at that point, I was like, I don't know how to fix this. I've never had a complaint. I don't know how to go about getting this fixed. But um, I just, instead of calling him, I loaded up in the truck and I went out and I got 5 minutes of his time and sat down and talked to him. And within a week of that meeting, we got to where we were having to order more trucks and trailers to service this customer because we actually got more freight than we intended on. And to this day, he will say that that was one of the best carrier relationships he ever had was with me. Uh,
That
and
5 minute personal touch.
yeah, yeah, just because I showed up and I was humble. I mean, I still to this day don't think I did anything wrong. I was trying to give him knowledge in an industry that he was not familiar with, so that it didn't shut down his company whenever the product was late. But I went into it very humble and apologized and told him that if he would give, our company another shot, me another shot, that he would have nothing but, high praises to sing after that. And it worked out good. So that for me was one of the big ones because I still, as far as I know, don't have an unhappy customer out there that I've dealt with. Um, but the other one, and this is more kind of on the employee side because it's led to some really good things, and I've told this story on a couple podcasts, but it's so interesting to me how you can be headed down one path and just chugging along and chugging along and chugging along thinking you're doing the right thing, and then something out of the blue hits. So for like 6 months, I spent a huge portion of my time studying leadership and reading books, watching YouTube, watching TED talks, anything I could get my hands on. Just how to be an effective leader, um, how how to gain the respect of your employees, how to grow the company, all this different stuff. And after 6 months, I really didn't feel like I was any farther along than I was when I started. And I was almost getting depressed about it. I was like, man, I've put a lot of time into this to not have, my aha moment. And I remember we were sitting at home one night and I was flipping, around Netflix trying to find something to watch. And I'm huge on like the show House, like doctor shows. Like I
Sure.
love that stuff.
Hmm.
And there was a new one on there I'd never seen before, and it was called New Amsterdam. And I was like, now let's check this out. Let's see what it is. And I started the episode, and the whole series that they made, it was a TV show, was this doctor that had lost his sister to a hospital that didn't take very good care of her. And he had made it all the way up to like dean of medicine, like the top dog at a hospital. And New Amsterdam, this hospital had hired him, and he walked into this big stadium seating type auditorium where they give speeches and stuff with everybody in there. And he very he introduced himself, said, I'm the new guy in charge here. And he said, I want to do things better than they've been done in the past. Like, we're going to totally change how things are done. And his whole deal, he said, how can I help? And and whenever he said that, I was like, this is the dude in charge. And he's not going, okay, in order to do that, surgery, this is what you're going to do. ER, this is what you're going to do. He took it all on himself and said, how can I help you make this a better place? And so I thought on that for, I mean, probably another month. And I started watching the show because he kept on that, for like the first season. After the first season, I really lost interest. But,
Hmm.
the first season was all about him going to all these different departments and going, how can I help you? And, and so I really got to studying that. And I brought that to our team here at work. And I said, I want you guys to look at this and think about this. And we're going to try to adopt a new philosophy here. So what we have done is we have this philosophy in our office of how can I help? And where it became important was I was always going into, dispatch going, "Hey, do you need any help with anything?" And the phrase "do you need any help with anything?" I ended up deciding for them to say, "Yes, I do need help with something," was them having to admit their failure at their job
Ah,
in order to do that, because nobody ever asked for it. I don't know if you've ever asked, do you need any help? I
yeah.
never have anybody go, yeah, man, I've been waiting on you to ask. I'm dying over here. And everybody's like, no, I got it. It'll be fine. I got it. But whenever you turn that around and go, hey, listen, I'm all caught up on my stuff. How can I help you today?
Yeah.
They've got no choice. Now it's, hey, I'm going to help you whether you like it or not. So you probably better give me some direction, or I'm probably going to mess up what you're working on.
Yeah.
And so whenever the entire office, whenever I explained that, everybody was like, "Hey, that kind of makes sense." And within a couple weeks, it was amazing. Just hearing in the office people going around going, "Hey, I'm caught up. I'm getting ready to go to lunch. How can I help you get caught up?" And it just gelled, the office staff so well. And to this day, we've had a couple people retire, since we adopted that. And I have heard those people say that was one of the most valuable things that they ever had anybody put into effect in their company, was just, you have to ask this question. If you aren't doing something important, go to somebody and ask them how you can help. Look for the busy person who is, drowning, and ask them, how can I help? And it's so simple,
Yeah.
but it was so huge at that time. We were in a huge growth spurt at that time. People were taking on, more responsibility, different jobs that they weren't used to. And to have everybody doing that. And then we ended up, 6 months into it, we were accidentally cross training people and didn't even realize it,
Yeah.
because, our accounts receivable lady, would be caught up on a Wednesday and come in dispatch and go, hey, how can I help you? And they'd go, well, all these papers really need, scanned in and put into our TMS side of things so that we can start dispatching loads. Well, all of a sudden, our AR person knows how to dispatch loads, and we're like, this is great.
Hmm.
So, to me, that's been one of my biggest things, for sure in the last 5 years, that came off a stupid Netflix show. After I did 6 months of studying and reading, all I had to do was, turn on the brain melting Netflix, and find the answer to what I was looking for.
Well, I think it's easy for me to say this looking back on your issue, but you know, you put in the effort for months and it was kind of, I won't say fruitless, but it wasn't igniting that spark.
Hmm.
And I think you had to get to the point where you kind of temporarily just put it on the back burner, not gave up, but just said, I'm not going to focus on that right now.
Yeah.
And then your mind was clear enough to just go, hey, wait a minute. I think I can apply that. And then you took it and ran with it.
Hmm.
So it might not have popped into your head as obvious if you were early on in that process of trying to soak stuff up.
It probably wouldn't have. I mean, the studying is always an important part, whether it actually gives you the answer or not. It prepares you to receive the answer somewhere.
Sure. Man, there's so much to logistics. You've got so many hats that you wear and all of your, well, your arms and legs are just moving all day long and you just, you're just constantly going. But you also, when I talk with you and I hear about that and then I get to know you as the person, you're kind of in your lane, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love what I do,
Yeah.
for sure.
Man, and that's the thing about this podcast is that I I see so many people that we spend so much of our lives in our career. There's just no reason to be miserable.
No,
There
no.
isn't. And
And there's so much opportunity out there.
Sure.
You know, there's no reason to be unhappy with what you do.
Yeah. And what's neat about this show is that I get to talk to people and I get to see that, yeah, there's a handful of my guests that I knew what I wanted to do. I went to college, I got my job, and I'm in my career.
Mhm.
But a lot of folks go, no, I had 6 jobs before I finally found this and I realized this is exactly what I was looking for.
It had
Or
nothing to do with my degree.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So, or I didn't even need a degree. There's a time and a place for college. There's a
There
time and a
is.
place for trade school, and there's a time and a place to just work hard.
I totally
So-
agree. Yeah, if I've got to have brain surgery, I want the guy that went to college.
I want the top of the student, I'm not even smart enough to say what they are, valedictorian, that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe I
want the
need to see a
best.
brain surgeon. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey,
But
no-
if my car's broken down,
Yeah.
I want the guy that's been working on cars since he was in diapers.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I don't care about your certifications.
Nope.
The experience is where the diagnostic part of it. Don't just replace parts.
yep, for sure.
Hey, Bo, thanks a lot, man. It was a really enjoyable conversation. You provided a lot of good insight into your career and some ancillary careers as well. And it was just a blast to talk with you. We'll have to talk more about overlanding when the show's over.
Yeah, for sure. And make sure anybody out there, find me on LinkedIn. Subscribe to my newsletter that I put out. And
Yeah.
if you want to get involved in logistics, I'm happy to talk.
And your last name is Prock,
Yep, PROCK.
Bo Prock. And the name of your on LinkedIn, your newsletter or your blog is what's it called again?
It's a newsletter that I put out 3 times a week, and it's called Caffeinated Logistics Talk.
All right. And do you want to say the name of your company you work for?
Yeah, it's Eagle Logistics in Purdy, Missouri.
PURDY.
Yep, that's it.
Purdy Mo. All right,
Yep.
man. Thanks a lot, Bo. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks for the time, man.
Take care.
Bye.
And that wraps up another episode of the Jobs Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully you found that interesting. As always, I wait until the end of an interview to ask you to like, subscribe, and share. I feel it's important that I earn that support from you. Thanks again, and we will see you on the next one.